Welcome back. We're going to take a look at some of the cultural changes in America during the 1920s. When we talk about this, one of the first questions we're going to ask, and keep this in mind as we go through this material, is when two different ideas in a culture, like how people choose to live their life, change from time to time, does that actually help American society move forward, or does that set us back? That clash, that idea of different ways. Sometimes it's in different generations, other times it's in different principles or beliefs that people have. And in this section, we're going to take a look at some of those beliefs. Some of them are influenced by how cities changed us, others how prohibition and racism and religion changed us. So we're going to start first with the notes on the new cities. And your book in chapter 21, section 1 goes over this. So let's take a look. We already talked about the culture and the conflicts that were changed in the 1920s. This guy right over here is a minister, actually. He's one of the most popular ministers of the 1920s. He hated alcohol and preached that, we should have a constitutional amendment to ban it. We're going to take a look at that in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about the differences between rural and urban. So rural means farm, suburban area. Urban refers to the general cities in which people lived. So in 1920, for the first time in American history, more people lived in, let's see, communities with a population of 25,000 to more than 1 million. Okay, more and more people were moving into these cities, 2 million people leaving farms and towns every year. Okay, clearly cities drew people in, and some of that was just basic economics like money and jobs. But that also changed the way people thought and acted. So your book asks us in here to take a look at the impact on how urbanization, the idea of moving towards cities, how it influences politics, economics, and culture. So let's take a look at that. Okay. First, we know it influences politics. If more people are moving into cities, then clearly there are more people voting, but they also are more people that need to be represented. And in this case, a lot of them were immigrants. They were people coming from Poland, Ireland, Russia, Italy, Sweden, and other places. Okay, in each day, in this case, Chicago, used as an example, 300,000 workers were just in the downtown area alone. And in the nighttime, obviously that had an impact as well. That influences the economics. They were in the downtown area working. Their entertainment value in the area, obviously, was a way in which they spent their money there too. Drinking, gambling, dating, and other things were common in the cities, but shocking to some of the people in the small towns. So that is also some of the differences in culture. So we see all of those changes happening here in cities. Now, the next topic that we're going to go into here is prohibition. And let's let a clip speak about this, okay? And then we're going to talk about it. So here, take a look. This is on a PBS series that came out, I don't know, around September or so.
From Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, it was exactly what America wanted, and it caught us completely by surprise. It turned citizens into criminals, and criminals into kings. It changed the very nature of our democracy twice. Prohibition.
What a stupid idea it was that people actually thought you could get away with this. That you could actually ban alcohol, completely eliminate its usage in American society. It's a preposterous idea.
It was a struggle between small towns and big cities, the wets and the dries, with the whole country caught in the middle.
It's not that sin is so terrible, it's that sin is very attractive. And that's why we're always tempted to do it.
You drank to show that you were a man, but you get drunk and all of a sudden you can't provide for your family, you can't do your job.
It was a time when women found their voice and help to change the nation.
The women gather in front of a saloon and they start praying. And the movement takes off like wildfire.
And our greatest heroes were also our greatest criminals.
Some call it bootlegging, some call it racketeering. I call it a business.
It fueled the Jazz Age and made the 20s roar.
It was the beginning of the time when boys and girls slept together. There was quite a lot of that going on, which astounded me from my innocent background.
Discover the true story of America's great experiment.
Once the government begins forbidding things, then somebody will come along and say, I got it. Step around the corner.
From Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, Prohibition, only on PBS.
All right. So you get the idea that Prohibition had a huge impact, but, going back to our previous comments about cities and small town life, well, Prohibition really set that in motion. So what happens is, you can read about it more in your book, but basically a religious movement begins to, get women involved, and after World War I, especially because of anti-German sentiment, a lot of people think that drinking is a sin. And so what happens is the Volstead Act gets put into place. It basically establishes a Prohibition Bureau, and the head of that Prohibition Bureau is a pretty aggressive and meaningful woman who believes that Prohibition is really at the root of a lot of American problems. And so over time, what happens is more and more Congress people get influenced by the idea that they should just get rid of it, and they do. So they pass an amendment to the Constitution. It's the 18th Amendment. And then it's gone. So you see the rise of places like speakeasies, which were kind of bars that were protected so that when you walked in it looked like a store, but down the back hall there would be, a nightclub, bootleggers, people who would smuggle in. And you also had the beginning of something else, specifically, and that's where Al Capone comes in. He ran a network of over 10,000 speakeasies. He was netting over $60 million a year. He used violence in order to get rid of his competition. He was estimated at worth $100 million, and he was kind of untouchable. And one account has that he paid off over half of all of the Chicago police officers, and believed he was untouchable. Eventually, the United States pulls him in on tax evasion, which is the only thing they can get him on because most people don't want to testify against him. Well, Prohibition, has, clearly its causes and effects, and your book goes into that. Some of those effects, though, you have to wonder, did they produce an outcome that was overall more than just a culture clash in American history? So, what ends up happening during the Great Depression is once Franklin Delano Roosevelt becomes president, he and Congress work on getting rid of the amendment to the Prohibition law, and they do. And by 1931, Prohibition's over, and it's seen as a failure that America and its government could not enforce. And that was that the drinking and making and possessing of alcohol was considered illegal. And now after 1931, and ever since, it's legal again. America is still today facing some of those issues with the war on illegal drugs. So, we took a look here at the effectiveness of the Prohibition era. We took a look at the effects of organized crime, but one thing we haven't talked about yet is the KKK. And for that, I wanted to give you some background. The KKK was founded after the Civil War by some Confederates. That would be my dog. Confederates that didn't want to give up the war, basically, and wanted to continue their racist policies. And by the 1920s, the Klan, I mean, think about this. They helped elect 16 senators. By 1924, the Klan claimed to control 24 of the nation's 48 state legislatures. It blocked a person from getting elected to become the Democratic candidate for the presidency. And they claimed to have over 3 million members after World War I. And they were pretty open about it. One of the things that I put in your notes is information here, actually a picture, on the Klan marching down right in front of the state capitol. I mean, they were not hidden at all. And partly this was a result of more African Americans moving to the north, into northern cities. Again, that city rural life culture clash. And you know, this was also in the 1920s, the height of America's race riots, when people were shot and killed and beaten simply for the color of their skin in many major cities. So what we come next to is this idea of fundamentalism, this other culture shift in American history. And your book talks about it in terms of religion. And the short end of it means basically that more and more Americans were heading back to the traditions of the Protestant religion, of Christianity. And so one of the specific ways in which more and more Americans became more religious was in rejecting the ideas of this guy, Charles Darwin, who argued in the middle of the 1800s that all life forms evolve. And this is comes into the clash with the idea of the Bible's account of creation. So what ends up happening? It's something called the Scopes trial. Sometimes it's known as the Scopes monkey trial. But a biology teacher in Tennessee decides that he is going to teach evolution. Okay? Even though Tennessee in 1925 makes it a crime to teach evolution. Now think about this in our biology classes right now. Okay? Clearly, evolution is taught as a part of biology. But can a state ban the idea of teaching a certain theory of science? Or should there be an equal representation of religion and science in a biology class? Or should religion not be part of public education? I mean, all of these things came out in the trial. So there were two of the most famous lawyers at the time who argued this case. Clarence Darrow is one of them. William Jennings Bryan is the other. Darrow takes the evolution side. Bryan takes the creationalist side. And what happens is they argue, and they argue over this idea on American radio. And there are a couple different ways that, this comes down. So it, ultimately is an argument of whether the Bible is actually true. And your book talks about, the age of the earth and what the topic of 6 days means in the creation of the universe. But ultimately, Scopes is found guilty. I mean, he admits that he broke the law. And so he was fined $100. But this trial really ignited the differences that many people had, specifically those who believed in science versus those who believed in religion. And again, this is another culture clash, just like the culture clash over Prohibition, just like the culture clash between city life and rural life, and like the culture clash in organized crime and racism. And that is this idea that America's changing, and the people who remembered, like in America where people lived on farms and went by horse from one village to another village, it just doesn't exist anymore. America is a very powerful industrial and changing country, and so all of these points that we bring up in the notes actually refer to that. So that's that, and I will talk to you next time.